Hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Dominic and today we're going to be talking about how to convert a sequence of images that we have rendered out from our Maya RenderMan batch render process and convert it into a movie video file such as a .mov or .mp4 using a program, Adobe After Effects. So this is just a very quick surface level tutorial on After Effects, which is a very capable program mainly used for compositing and visual effects. We're not really going to talk about doing all of that stuff. We're just going to be talking about creating videos out of our footage that we had batch rendered. So let's go ahead and launch Adobe After Effects. And while we do that, we're also just going to keep note of the directory in which you have stored all of your images from your batch rendering process. Now this is set whenever you type in what directory or select what directory that you want your image output to be with your RenderMan render settings. So make sure that you know where that directory is for this project. Make sure that all of your images are stored into a folder. I like to use the VDEV rig for this particular case, but just make sure that they're all accessible to you for you to grab them. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and make a new After Effects project. I'm going to click on the After Effects new project icon right up here in the top left, and that launches a new project UI. So let's talk about the UI very quickly. Over here in the very left side, this is our composition library. So whenever we add in footage or other compositions, they will show up on this left side. Now on the bottom, we have our main workspace where we can include or add compositions or add footage. We can add effects, we can kind of buffer through them in the time slider, and we can make all of the adjustments and things necessary. On the right side, you've got your effects preset where you can change things like color correction, noise, grain, things like that, brightness, contrast. However, since this whole workspace, this whole file is empty, there is nothing over there right now. So let's go ahead and import our footage. I'm just going to hover my mouse over the left side in the materials library, right click, and I'm going to go down to import and I'm going to click on file. You can also use the hotkey Control I to do this as well. So we're going to import our file, and this is the directory in which all of my images are stored. These are EXR images. They're very similar to something like a PNG or a JPEG. However, EXRs hold a lot of data and they're fantastic for compositing in a program like After Effects, Nuke, Dragonframe, or something like that. So I'm going to choose the very first frame of my entire sequence, and I'm not going to choose all of them. I should note I've got 240 images in here. I don't need to select all of them. I just need to select the very first one. After Effects will understand that all of these images have the same nomenclature and are sequential, so it will bring in all 240 of those images, even if I just hit one, specifically because I have down here Open EXR Sequence checked on. So if I just grab that one, it'll understand that this is all a sequential footage. So let's select the very first one up here, and I'm going to hit import. And with that, we can see it up now in our footage library. So there's the name of those files. This tells me that it is a frame range of frame 1 to frame 240. So all 240s are in there. It also tells us the resolution. That's exactly what I set in my render settings. And a couple of things up there. Now, we don't see it in our workspace yet because we need to bring it into our workspace. So let's go ahead and just left click and drag and drop this down into our workspace here at the very bottom. And now we can see in our viewport exactly what our frames should look like. And these should look just as, whenever we render them out in RenderMan. So a couple of things to note. I can drag this slider to see all of my frames kind of put together sequentially, and it's going in order of the numbers of frames that we've got in there. You can also hit spacebar to just play this guy, and hit spacebar again to pause it if you'd like to do that as well. Now, there's a couple of things that's important to note. While we're in here, we can also modify a couple of composition settings that I think are very important. And to do that, we can just right-click anywhere in this center viewport screen. And the second option that we get whenever we do so is composition settings. So let's go ahead and click on that. So our composition settings are very, very important, which is why it's so accessible. But we can do things like change the name of this composition. So I could say this is instead called DOM truck render. You can also Do a couple of things down here, such as change the frame rate. This is very important because I had set the default frame rate from RenderMan as 24 frames a second. However, Adobe After Effects defaults to a frame rate of 30 frames per second. This is going to make my original footage play a little bit quicker than normal. So in order to fix this, I need to come to the drop down right here where it says frame rate and change it to 24 frames a second. And I can use this 24 in the drop down to do so. And so now that resets everything. You can do a couple of things in here, such as change the resolution, change the aspect ratio, anything like that. However, I'm going to leave that standard because I want this to look pretty much exactly how I set it up with render settings in RenderMan. But with that being said, now that the frame rate is corrected to 24, I can hit OK to save the changes. And now you'll notice our composition up here says 24 frames a second rather than 30 frames a second. Now there's a couple of things that you can add into your footage while you're at this level. These are optional. These I don't expect you guys to fully do, especially to fully learn in this very quick tutorial. But while you're working in After Effects, you can of course stitch in things such as audio. If you have audio tracks that you want to put up with your animations, or perhaps to layer on with your animations, you can add shapes, designs, logos, text, things like that. You can also add effects. Effects that can distort, that can correct or change color, that can denoise or add noise and grain or footage grain to your shots as well. There's a lot of things that you can do with Adobe After Effects, and I'm afraid we just don't have enough time to cover in this tutorial. So let's move on to a very important part. This is taking our footage, our sequence of images right here, and converting them into a video file. And in order to do that, we need to render this guy again. But this is a very relatively quick process. So let's go ahead and click on File in the very top left. And I'm going to go to Export. And if I hover over that, I've got some options, and I'm going to choose the second one, Add to Render Queue. And if we click on that, you'll notice our workspace has shifted, where now I've got an additional tab called Render Queue. So Composition tab, Render Queue tab. Now in the Render Queue tab, you'll typically see this kind of layout. I've got, let's see, I've got my output module. These are settings that I can modify what type of video that I want it to be spit out from. So if I click on that in blue, I can of course change this to spit out different deliverables for this render process. So I can make a GIF, I can make an MP3, I can make an MP4, which is called an H.264 file. But you can also have an AVI file if you want to as well, or perhaps a QuickTime file. So depending on the type of output that you need, you can choose it right here. Now I'm going to leave it as H.264 because I want that particular video file, which is basically an MP4. There's a couple of things that you can change around here that I'm not going to dive into, but if it has audio, you can modify the audio and how that's stored and compressed. Same goes with color spaces and things like that. But mainly, I just want to make sure that H.264 is checked, and I'm not going to mess with anything else. I'm just going to hit OK. Now this part is very important where it says output to. This tells me where it's going to spit out this video file. Now usually I'll just choose something like desktop, so that way I can just get it immediately on the screen. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to select desktop and hit save, but make sure that you have identified a output directory for this new MP4 file to be spit out in. And with all that said and done, let's go ahead and click on render over here in the top right. We'll do that. It's going to parse through the entire scene fairly quickly, as it doesn't take long. And once you hear a little bing from the After Effects, then we'll know that our video footage is completely done. And if I navigate to my desktop and find it, then I will see a brand new video, 24 frames a second, of all of my footage stitched together. And there we go. That is how we can very quickly turn our sequence of EXR images into a video file for us to also stitch together. Let's say if we have 3 shots, we can also put all of them in After Effects and render it out as one video for our assignments as well. So if you guys have any questions about this, please let me know. I also have a published detailed walkthrough that's in the assignment page But of course, if you guys have any questions, leave a comment or reach out to me directly. But with all that said and done, have a fantastic night. I will see you guys next time.